So the reason we need to have a Royal Commission is that all these things can come out, warts and all, of the restrictions and the way it's handled and the intimidation tactics that are used. And you've got trustees where 80% of a bank's insolvency work in Melbourne goes to one trustee. Now, if we're looking at fairness, what chance has that trustee got of being independent? So much of his work is relied on this one creditor. So if this one creditor wants something done, is he impartial in helping the bankrupt and to work through the issues? No, he goes after the bankrupt. And unless we have a Royal Commission and expose all these things of what goes on, and not just listen to the trustees, or not just listen to the lawyers, not just listen to the accountants, but listen to the pre-insolvency people and listen to the bankrupts and the company directors that have caught in this situation and understand what goes on, then we can't have any growth and development in the industry. The biggest reason to have a Royal Commission into the insolvency industry is the same as the banking industry, that the individuals that suffer the most, that have the emotional traumas and the upsets, and some of them even commit suicide, have their voices heard, that there's an independence where it can be looked at and said, yes, the banks did the wrong thing in this area, yes, the trustees and liquidators and the regulators start treating the clients, just as the employment agency did, start treating the clients as individuals and the respect that they deserve. They're not criminals, just the same as the person that took out the home loan from the bank that couldn't pay it back isn't necessarily always in the wrong. The company director and the bankrupt isn't always in the wrong. And unless we start doing this and developing the fairness, then we will continue to struggle as an industry. One of the things I find in the industry is that what we've got, liquidators and trustees that can arbitrarily make a decision, not an independent decision, can arbitrarily make a decision that they are entitled to X amount of dollars from the bankrupt or from the company director. And that's just how it is. Whether it's correct or not, they say it's not up to them to make a defence, it's up to the bankrupt. He hasn't got the money to make it. So the liquidator or the trustee gets away with it. And yet if it was in the court system, the person making that decision, being the magistrate or the judge, would remove himself if he got financial advantage from the decision. He would remove himself and place someone else. And yet we are putting so much emphasis on the private sector, trustees and bankrupts. And it's very easy to say, oh yes, well, they can object. These people are out there trying to make a living, trying to build their life again with no money. What opportunity have they got to seek advice, to know that they've only got 30 days or 60 days to object and then it's too late? The reality of it is that they're just trying to put food in their mouth. One of the things that may well come out of the Royal Commission, and certainly should come out, is that there's a shift from helping people to reconstruct their life. So undoubtedly from a Royal Commission, I would hope would come out of it, was instead of people and trustees and liquidators and regulators devastating people's lives, that they can reconstruct their lives. And that's the reason for a Royal Commission, this reconstruction. The emphasis undoubtedly up to now has been on devastation, and the emphasis has been on, regardless of the person and regardless of their situation, how can we get every cent they've got, whether we're entitled to it or not, every cent that they've got, to pay our fees and to pay the creditors back. The reason there should be a Royal Commission, there's an emphasis on intimidation and bullying bankrupts and company directors into complying. The reason there should be a Royal Commission is that trustees and liquidators ultimately make the decision on whether they pursue money or don't pursue money, not on whether it's right or wrong. The reason there should be a Royal Commission is the trustees and liquidators chase money, and quite often the only beneficiary is their fees are paid, not the creditors get any money back. The reason there should be a Royal Commission is that have an emphasis on compliance with the trustees and make it impossible for them to make money as an individual. The reason there should be a Royal Commission is that the system is basically flawed in that you have officers of the court, being trustees and liquidators, making decisions on financial returns to them as opposed to making decisions on financial returns to the creditors. The reason there should be a Royal Commission is that there's an overemphasis on pre-insolvency people referring to trustees and liquidators when it's acceptable for trustees and liquidators to refer work from one to another and build a relationship. The reason there should be a Royal Commission is that solicitors do work for particular trustees and liquidators on a pro bono basis in the hope that there's a reward. The reason there should be a Royal Commission is that the tactics used in letters and in correspondence isn't reconciliatory to a bankrupt who's emotionally upset and whose family's going through a hard time. It's to point out, if they don't comply, all the things that will happen. And yet the reason there should be a Royal Commission is because the trustees and liquidators spend time pointing out the penalties involved if they don't comply, but they don't feel that they need to point out that they've got a defence or they've got an opportunity of fairness in keeping some of the assets. They just take them because it's up to the bankrupt or the company director to know what he can keep. And yet the same principle doesn't apply in the intimidatory tactics that are used.